Good morning. This is Truman Rowe with TruTechnical Partners, CEO. I'd like to be able to, I appreciate everybody being on the webinar today, and I would like to introduce you to a person who knows an awful lot about security, not just technology, but how it affects every one of our businesses. Dave Stelzl is a CISSP, an industry expert in the fields of information security, and is working and has been working in the data security industry for over 20 years. He's worked with many companies all over the world, addressing business leaders on the strategies being used in today's leading cyber gangs, and offers an insight on why even the most well-equipped companies are losing the battle against cyber attacks. David is the author of 5 books, including Digital Money, Data at Risk, and The House in the Cloud, just to mention a few. He also will share with us 7 essential mindsets needed to secure your company's most valuable digital asset, something we all need to do knowingly before considering new technologies to enter into the cloud, BYOD, and big data. David speaks with many years of experience, having consulted well-known companies including Wells Fargo, Visa, Johnson & Johnson, and Bank of America. So I'd like everybody to help me join David Stelzl today on our webinar. Thank you very much. You're up, David.
All right. Well, thanks, Truman. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Thanks, Dave.
I'm going to pull up some slides, and if everybody just give me a quick second to do that, we should be in good shape. Where are my slides? Okay, let me just figure out what happened to my slides. All right, what happened to them? Where did the slides go? I just had them a second here ago. All right, let me just see. Can you see my slides now, Truman?
Yeah, your slides are up on the screen, Dave. It starts with the big problems.
Okay, so somehow my slides ended up coming up in the wrong spot here, so I'm not sure why that happened, but let me just, here we go. Okay, so you should be good now. All right, so apologize for the delay. You know, when you're doing these things live, all kinds of weird stuff happens. So anyway, so let's dive into this. And so today, I want to not talk about like deep dive into security. So some of you might be security engineers or in IT or something like that, but I'm really speaking to business leaders. So if you're in a technical role, you really want to grab your management people and get them tuned in here while we get started, because what we're going to talk about here are things that are really about the data inside a company. When I look at companies today and what's valuable inside them, what kind of makes them tick, that's what we want to talk about today. Everything that a company does today is dependent on its what I call digital assets. So Truman mentioned a minute ago the one of the books I wrote called Digital Money, right? What's that about? It's not about Bitcoin. It's about data. And data has become a currency. In fact, I just read in the Wall Street Journal that data is like the oil of yesterday. So if you've got data and you're sitting there thinking, well, nobody would really want my data, the truth is people do want your data because it is the oil of yesterday. And the person who has the most data wins, okay? And what you don't want is you don't want other people to come in and steal your data, because this creates a huge, huge problem. So today I want to show you, I want to kind of give you a picture of the trends out there. I'm not going to get super technical, but I want you to be able to kind of see how simple it really is for companies to get in and get your data. And I want to show you, I think, like one of the big mistakes that companies out there are making. And it's actually, once you see it, you're going to go, man, we can fix that. It's not that hard to fix. But people just haven't done it. They haven't thought about it this way. And I think largely because of, well, largely because a lot of the products out there that are being sold are being advertised in a way that misleads us into thinking we could be secure in a way that doesn't necessarily make us secure. So I want to show you today what it is that creates security. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to give you some steps, some actual steps of action that you can take to start to build what I would call a security culture inside your business. Okay, so very practical stuff. Talk about the trends, talk about that one big mistake, and then get into the steps that your company should be taking to build a culture of security inside the organization to protect those digital assets. So as we go through here, first thing I want to do is just kind of step back for a second and just look at some global happenings. Now, this isn't security related necessarily. This is about your business, and it's about growing your business. So depending on what size your company is, it doesn't really matter. Small businesses, even medium and large businesses, are all involved in what I would call today an age of digitalization, the digitalization megatrend. We live in a digital age. You know, it doesn't really matter what field you're in. You got to be in computers. If you build cars, you're in computers. If you are in business, you're in computers. Whatever you do, you're in computers because it's all computerized. It is a mega trend or a paradigm shift, and it's getting more so, right? Everything is moving toward digitalization. So what does that mean? It means we're seeing a lot of data moving into the cloud and a lot of data aggregation. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. We're seeing everything connected to the internet. And this totally changes the way we should be thinking about security. So you think about your HVAC system online, your phone system is now a computer, your car is a computer, everything's a computer. And the Internet of Things is connecting all those computers so that we can control them centrally, we can collect data, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that a business can do today because of that, in terms of connecting with clients and gathering up intelligence about how people are interacting with your business, both on the supplier side, the purchase side, even internal employees, creating more efficiencies in the organization, all kinds of things that really are a benefit to your business, and even reducing the cost and the complexity of your computing environment by leveraging enterprise applications that are in the cloud that at one time weren't even affordable to a smaller business, but are today. It's a great place to be. However, if we don't get our focus on some of the things that are changing in the security world, we're going to be in trouble. So if we look at the security world, we see some big problems out there. And a lot of those big problems are coming because people are moving faster in innovation than they are in securing stuff. And so we're seeing, like, for instance, in the Wall Street Journal just recently, the North Korean government is talking about, well, I guess analysts and you know, people in the military are talking about North Korea potentially getting much more aggressive, breaking into the banks around the world. Okay, so not too long ago, we saw them break into the Bank of Bangladesh and steal $80 million in a matter of, you know, minutes, seconds. I mean, fast. You know, it didn't take them years to get in there or even hours to load up trucks. It was a quick, easy attack of the SWIFT system. But we're seeing that spread and target other global banks to bring money into their economy. So, you know, this is a terrible way for a country to build itself, but that's the kind of thing we're seeing. We're seeing attacks on our infrastructure, both on military infrastructure, stealing things from us, as well as hacking into organizations like the FDIC that protect our money. And you can assume that they're breaking into anything, and they being all different types of people that we're going to talk about as we go along here. And some of those things are going to be privacy issues. Some of those things are going to be national security related. And some of those things are going to be business related, even down to the small business. So these are global trends, just to kind of give you a feel for what's happening everywhere. But I want to bring this down into something much more specific that relates to your business and is specific to what it is you're trying to achieve in your own business. Okay, so when we start to talk about small business and medium business and even large business, but we're seeing a ton of fraud, meaning I am buying and selling stuff that's not mine. I'm pretending to be somebody I'm not, and this big, you know, you've obviously read about ransomware. I'm sure you've seen that in the news everywhere. You know, what exactly is that? It's locking you out of your data. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, we're not a target. But the fact is, everybody's a target. Anybody who needs access to their data is a target. I've even been targeted, and I have a very small business. But I've been targeted. I've gotten emails that have said, hey, if you don't do XYZ, we are going to encrypt all your stuff. Now, they haven't successfully done that, and I hope they never do. And I don't want to, call anybody out there and say they can't, because they can. Okay? People can get in and do this. And we can expect this trend to grow because it's easy to pull off. It's easy to get people to do the things that allow ransomware to be unleashed inside an organization, and it's very difficult to recover. You can expect to be down for days if you get hit with ransomware. And if you pay the ransom, you can expect to be out a lot of money. And if you pay the ransom, you can't guarantee you won't get hit again tomorrow. I mean, it's a big deal. And then we've got denial of service attacks, shutting people's servers down, taking them offline. And this is easy to do. In fact, you can go out online. You don't need to be a hacker to do this stuff. You can just be mad at somebody or want to get something or want to get even or whatever it is. And you can go out online and you can hire people to do all this stuff. You can buy the ransomware tools already built with instructions and send that stuff out. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about data aggregation and some of the threats there as we go along here, and you're going to want to pay close attention to that. But make no mistake, we are in a war. And the reason Truman asked me to come on today and do this webinar is because he's involved in trying to educate business leaders in his community. And I'm working with people like Truman all over the world, really just to help educate business leaders who have data, who are trying to grow businesses, like I'm trying to grow a business. And when we run into these kinds of threats, it can totally wipe us out. It can totally crush us. And when that starts happening, the economy of our country is in jeopardy. So it is important stuff. And I hope as we go through this, that I can show you what's happening and how to put some things in that are going to prevent that. Now, I want to start out just by looking at the organization here a little bit. We're just in the opening comments here section of this before we get into some of the tactical things that are going on. But every organization has somebody at the top that we're going to call the CIO. Even a small business like mine or like Truman's or like anyone out there that's got a small size business, it could be the business owner, like it is in my case, where you're also functioning as the CEO or the president, or maybe you're also the marketing person, and maybe you're even, the janitor. I don't know. But somebody's at the top who's controlling the IT decisions. And that person is making a shift, whether they know it or not, from just trying to make sure my computers are up and running, which, even if you had 10 people in your office, it was important to have those things up and running. If you've got 2,000 people in your business, that person is still trying to keep things up and running, the network, the servers, the workstations, depending on how complex it is, it's all the same stuff. But the new job is to look at technology and figure out how do we grow, okay? Meaning there was a time where I'm looking at my employees using infrastructure to do something, but now technology has evolved into something completely different. So now I'm thinking about social media. I'm thinking about digital marketing. I'm thinking about connecting with my clients using apps online. I'm thinking about all the different ways that I can leverage technology to grow and market and brand and service customers and solve issues and speed up production and reduce complexity and create efficiencies and create a competitive advantage, right? That's what technology is about today, creating a competitive advantage and a user experience or a customer experience that builds loyalty. Think Amazon.com, the ultimate in using technology to build a company that until really recently didn't really even have any brick and mortar presence, but was just all about servicing online, right? Really slick stuff and a way for just about any company to start to serve global markets without a lot of cost, without a lot of infrastructure. But as you're doing that, there are a lot of pressures that are coming up. How do we reduce costs? How do we maintain compliance? How do we get the talent we need to make all this stuff work and keep it up and running? What's our competition doing? Are they ahead of us? Are they leveraging stuff that we're not yet leveraging? And are they going to beat us to market? And are they somewhere else, like overseas, where their cost of operations is way lower than ours is? What are they doing? And then there's security. Is my data secure? Because it's all online now. No matter what it is, it's all online somewhere. And as I think through this, I've got people in my office that are trying to figure out how to leverage the cloud and big data analytics and getting more intelligence and being more mobile and more connected through social business type things with customers and suppliers. So all this stuff is coming together, and it's creating a new paradigm, as I mentioned, right? So the first thing I want to do here, just kind of with that backdrop, digitalization, business growth, pursuing bigger markets and growing the business, but under the threat of possibly making some mistakes. And so that brings us to, part one of the conversation here, which is, let's take a look at the trends. I want to show you 7 trends right now that I hope are, I don't just want to scare you. I want to educate you, really. And what I want you to picture here are not the computer geniuses in the company, but I want you to picture the end users that are working hard to get stuff done, right? The people who are using data and creating data to service customers, research and development, sales data, financial data, whatever it is that happens in the organization to make it run and allow it to build product or service or whatever you provide and bring it out to the customer in a way that they can use it, that it's of value to them. So that's who I want you to think about as we go through these, because this is where the attack is. Now, as we mentioned, a lot of this material is in my book, Digital Money. It's available on Amazon.com. And I really just wrote the book to give people an education. So let's start here. This is called the impact likelihood graph. And when I'm speaking to business owners or looking at a business, this is my first question. What's your big impact areas, and what's the likelihood that will happen? I mean, when I think about my own home or my own health or my kids or my family or really anything I'm doing, I'm always thinking about risk, because I guess maybe because I'm in this industry, right? But what are the things that would really impact us, like going out of business or a big healthcare crisis in our home, or whatever it is that could happen out there? What's the likelihood that will happen? Now, when I don't have this picture, it is super hard for me to make a decision. If somebody comes in and says, "Hey, can we afford to do this, or should we do that?" Without a picture of risk, it's hard to know. Should we buy an ultralight and fly it around the neighborhood? I don't know. What's the impact of a disaster, like crashing or something, or running into the neighbor's house or something? I don't know, right? Or it blowing up in midair. Well, all those things are bad, right? You could be a worrywart and do nothing and just stay home and be worried. But the question is, well, what's the likelihood of something bad happening? Should I let the kids go out and play today? Well, it looks like it's a nice day outside. There's not a criminal loose in our neighborhood, I don't think. At least I hadn't heard. So, the likelihood of a disaster or anything really significant is low. So, yeah, sure, everybody can go out and play, right? But if somebody releases a news press that there's, a mass murderer that's, on the loose in my neighborhood, all of a sudden the likelihood button goes high, the graph goes high, and the impact is great. And I'm thinking, no, we're all going to buckle down, close our doors, and, I don't know, watch out the windows, right? That's what this graph is about. So when we start looking at a business and start thinking, well, should they invest in more security technology? I don't know. The question is, what does their data look like? What kind of data do they have? What would be the impact of certain types of disasters? And then let's look at the likelihood. What's the likelihood of a server going down, or this data being lost, or the government wanting this data? And as we start to analyze those things, it gives us a very clear picture of what kind of decisions to make. Now, as we get into these 7 trends, I'm going to show you some things that affect that likelihood. Okay, so what you should be doing is kind of evaluating how important is our data. How much downtime can I afford to lose? How much data can I afford to lose? And what happens if it gets in the hands of other people? Those sorts of things. What happens if I just can't access data and service my customer? Is that bad? It probably is. Okay. Well, what's the likelihood of it happening? So issue number 1 is, as I look at the end user population doing their job, one of the misconceptions is that if I've got a password and I'm behind a firewall, I'm protected. But this is a total false sense of security. It does not work. Firewalls don't keep people out. Now, they filter out some stuff, but they don't keep hackers out. And that's why we keep reading in the paper of companies being taken over or their data being stolen or whatever it is, because firewalls don't stop all that stuff. Like, let's take ransomware. It comes through in email. Email gets through the firewall. It goes right through the firewall. And the firewall, might look at some things, but it's open. Okay, so if I can trick people into opening that thing up, It's not going to be stopped. Passwords don't work. There are numerous programs out there that can figure out a password in moments because it's computers. Computers can run through numbers much faster than we can, millions of times faster than we can. So the idea of a computer trying to figure out what a password is, it's not that difficult. But even worse, it's not hard for me to plant some software on your computer that tells me what your passwords are just by recording whatever you type into your computer. So my point here is there is a false sense of security that we could actually stop these people just if we had firewalls and passwords. It doesn't work. Number two is even more powerful, and this is social engineering. In fact, I was recently watching a video from a guy that I know, Kevin Mitnick. You may have heard of him. He's one of the old-time hackers. He's out there in the speaking circuit now, and he's demonstrating stuff. And, his ability to talk people into stuff is uncanny. But you know what? It's not unique. In fact, he has a book out there called The Art of Deception, where he shows how simple it is to talk people out of stuff. Do you know that he talked a major phone company, you may have heard of Motorola, out of the source code for their phones simply by calling them up, looking for the product manager of that particular device, pretending to be somebody in a different branch of the company, and asking them to email him all the source code. And you know what they did? Even though they had policies against it, and they even had to change some settings on their network to get that code through the perimeter security. But you know what? Their security guy made those changes so that they could send this to somebody that they thought they knew online. Now, isn't that crazy? That kind of stuff is so simple. Now, we look at ransomware. Just about every single instance of ransomware today involves some aspect of social engineering. It involves me sending an email in and saying, hey, look at these photos, or here's a link to this, or I'm a support person, I need you to download this patch, or whatever it is. People do it because it sounds credible. It looks real. And so they do it. Cato, corporate account takeover. This is something happening all the time. I've got another colleague in business. He's also a speaker and a business coach, Vern Harnish. And I was recently interviewed for Forbes magazine by Vern about security. And so we spent, 45 minutes talking about security. And then just a week after that happened, Vern was out overseas speaking in Russia about business. And somebody sent an email to his accounts payable people asking them to wire transfer money, about $400,000, to 4 different companies. Now, his team did it. They made the transfer. Now, why did they do that? Well, when Vern got back into the country and he looked at the email requests, they were from him. And they looked like his email. In other words, they were written exactly like Vern would direct his team to do it. So they had no question. I mean, this is something he's asked for before. So they get these emails and they follow the instructions. And the instructions are to email it to to wire transfer this money to some account that they're not familiar with, but it's to a name that they are familiar with. And of course, it's fake. It's just social engineering. And that's what social engineering is. It's pretending I'm somebody else or convincing you to do something. And it's not that hard because people aren't wired to think this is a scam. This is a scam. No, instead, we're just working as hard as we can, and we're used to seeing something. It happens all the time, and so we do it again, and we don't really question it, and we're just trying to help people. So this is happening every day, whether it's an invoice that's fraudulent or it's something else, a wire transfer. This stuff is happening every day, and we're just operating inside business trying to be helpful. That's what the big happy family is, right? We all work together. We do whatever we can. And you know as well as I do, when you're walking in to the back door of a hotel, for instance, and there's somebody behind you, you hold the door for them. You don't shut the door in their face and say, hey, buddy, you got to have your card. Do you have your card? That's not the way we operate because it's rude. And it seems rude, too, on the phone to say, I know you email me all the time, but can you just confirm somehow that this is really you? Because it seems rude and unproductive. But yet, people are taking advantage of it. And then we've all got our own device. We've all got our phone. We're carrying around what has enough power to be called a mainframe years ago, now in the palm of our hand. And for some reason, now everybody thinks of their own IT, that they can just download apps from anywhere and they can kind of mix business with social. And they're going to do that. Bring your own device. That's what that's all about. It used to be the companies were kind of halting people on that, but they're not anymore. And they can't. It's difficult to stop people from using their own device. And I'm not saying you should. I'm just saying it needs to be secure to do that. And there are ways to do that, but many companies haven't done it. Now, if we look at social media, this one is the most important one to me because it has to do with data and the misuse of data. Now, here's the thing. I mentioned earlier, data is probably the most important asset to any company. But we are all defined by our data. Now, what that means is if I have all your data, I can be you, right? I mean, think about the last time you took out a loan or you called customer service for some issue or a medical something, and they're asking you for information to validate who you are, right? And what are you giving them back? You're giving them verbally, you're giving them data that they have in a computer system that they can then measure, map against what you just told them. If I have your data, if I know your name, if I know your mother's maiden name, if I have your social security number and a few other pieces of information, I can do just about anything. Okay, just a few pieces of information. But data aggregation is powerful. Look at this quote at the bottom of this screen here. $350 billion. This is the valuation of Facebook. Now, what does Facebook own in terms of infrastructure? I mean, a few servers, data center. They don't own much, but they do own data. And that data was given to them for free. Now, I hope this annoys you a little bit, that somebody can have $350 billion of free data that you gave them, that I gave them, right? Now, here's the thing. They are not the biggest data aggregator out there. They are aggregating data, and they're using it to build up their marketing engine because they make an incredible amount of money because they know that with all that data, they can profile people down to a pretty narrow people group that allows a marketer to get in there and market to those people in a compelling way and know all about those people. I want to market to people who are 30 that drive pink Cadillacs and make $50,000 a year and have a drug problem. I can do that in Facebook. But data aggregators, there are 4 major data aggregators, are much bigger than Facebook. And they are buying Facebook's data and Google's data and your local grocery store's data and your car data and everything you do data. So anytime you've searched anything, wherever you drive in a newer vehicle, did you know your car weighs you when you get in the seat of it? Newer cars do, the computers do. It knows everything about you. And all that data is being aggregated and shipped up to some company, one of 4 companies out there. And these guys have incredible artificial intelligence, or what's a subset of that, deep machine learning in computer technology, that can take that data and extrapolate all kinds of things about you. So in other words, they know all about you. And not only that, they can predict things. They can predict things like what your social concerns are and your religious convictions and your moral convictions, how you'll vote in the next election. I mean, all kinds of stuff. What would keep you from buying something? What would cause you to buy something? What's going to cause you to spend more money than you have on some product that you don't need? I mean, all kinds of things. And you can go as a marketer and you can buy lists of all kinds of stuff that people aren't really wanting to reveal, like all kinds of weird sexual fetishes that they're involved in, or addictions they're struggling with, or debt they can't get out of, or, I mean, a whole host of things. My point is that there's no privacy anymore, because these computers predict all kinds of things based on the data you've already put out there. And if somebody gets a hold of that data, on the marketing side, they have the opportunity to manipulate and misuse you. On the hacker side, they have the opportunity to become you, which is even more dangerous. Taking out loans under your name, buying stuff and selling it under your name, using your insurance money to make claims and get expensive medical equipment, which can then be sold on eBay. All kinds of things that can come back to you and get you in huge, huge trouble, and it'd be very difficult to get out of it, to prove you're innocent. In fact, I have a friend in Colorado who wrote a book called Stolen Lives, and guess what he had? He had his life stolen, had his business taken, had everything taken from him, simply because he threw some stuff in the paper. He wasn't even a victim of this level of aggregation. He just threw stuff in the garbage. Somebody got it and somebody used it against him. And today he's a speaker speaking about security. What do you know, right? The insider threat is huge. People steal data. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to small businesses and said, you know, you ought to have some accountability to the person who keeps your books, because it's just too easy now that everything's digital to steal money. And they're like, oh, no, you know, we've known this person forever. But you know what? I've had so many times people come back to me months later and said, you know what? You were right. That person was stealing from me. Okay, ran into some financial issues, their personal lives, and people get desperate. The economy's down, or they got some kind of illness in their family, or something happens, and they need money, and they'll go get it. They'll get it out of your system. Okay, this happens all the time. Politicians do it, governments do it, people do it, your employers do it, employees do it. Okay, it's a serious, serious issue. Okay. Number 6, nation state. We won't spend too much time on this, but just understand the nations out there want our data, especially if you're inventing stuff, R&D data. China loves to build products that they didn't invent, that you did invent. You take 10 years of R&D information and crank out a product in no time, have no cost in it hardly, except for the manufacturing price, and sell it for a tenth of what somebody who actually spent the time to develop it did. And then, of course, we've got the warfare aspect, which you can't do much about, but just be ready, because you don't know what's going to happen. Now, I do want to just mention this at the end of these 7 really scary things, and that is that compliance is not security. Most of us have some compliance regulation we're required, whether it's PCI or HIPAA or Sarbanes or GLBA or whatever it is you have, but security and compliance are not the same thing. So you can have all the boxes checked for PCI compliance, but your data can be wide open. Okay, so don't think that the PCI people have you covered, especially if you're a small business and you did that self-assessment online. I've done it too. It has nothing to do with security. I have to have a policy on my computer, and I answered a few questions, and the assumption is that you're good. Okay, well, I'm PCI compliant, but that is not what makes me secure. And the fact is, nobody has this covered. Nobody is hacker-proof. We're all vulnerable. And there's just some things we need to put in place to reduce our level of risk. And I want to show you what some of those things are. But there's a big mistake out there. There's a misconception about what it is that makes security work. And here's really why this second area here is the reason I'm really here. You can read the paper and find out all that other stuff, but this piece right here is not in the paper. I can tell you that right now. So I would jot down a few notes here. This is really, really important. And you know, this one big mistake here that's being made out there is not that difficult to fix, but if you don't fix this one thing, you will have no idea. Remember that statistic I threw out a few minutes ago? It takes 14 months on average for a company to know that they've been hit, and by then it's too late. So what is that big mistake? Well, I want to just drop back here for a second and share with you, I live about an hour out of Charlotte, North Carolina, major city, right? In Charlotte, there's lots of crime happening. It may be way less than some other cities, but I'm telling you, I get news messages, flashes, or whatever on my phone all day long about people being shot and all that kind of stuff. But I live pretty far out. I'm in a county that's pretty safe, and there's not a lot going on, and there's a lot of fields surrounding our neighborhood, and it's pretty spread out, and there's just not a lot of crime here. It's a pretty safe place. But last year, we had a whole string of break-ins in our neighborhood, like 4 or 5 break-ins in a row, day after day, in the middle of the day. And our neighborhood does communicate through a neighborhood forum, and we're kind of all sharing information. Hey, so-and-so got hit, and people are out in the street, and they're patrolling, and they're watching, and and the police are coming into our neighborhood. We have a police station across the street from our neighborhood, and they're in here patrolling, looking, just keeping an eye out day and night. But every day in the afternoon, you would think that after a while people would start to figure this out. But houses are getting hit, stuff's getting stolen, jewelry, electronics, things like that, and nobody seems to be able to stop it. Now, as I looked at all that, it occurred to me as I analyzed this a little bit that, all these people have made this mistake. It's not only true in the digital world, it's true in the physical world too, that if you make this mistake, you don't have any real security. But if you could fix this one thing, the chances of being broken into go way down. And so as that was happening, I wasn't really concerned because my home is protected the right way, but so many aren't. So I want you to think here for a moment, not only about your data, but think about your home for a minute. Is your home safe? Are you protected in the way that I'm getting ready to show you here? So we're going to use your home as an example. That's what I want you to be thinking about. How do I keep my house safe? What do we do? When we go to bed at night or I'm out of town, I travel, and I go and speak at conferences and stuff. Is my home safe when I leave and leave my kids here and my wife and so forth, right? Now, you got to evaluate this. Just take a look at it. What is it that protects your home? So at nighttime, we've got kind of a routine, right? We do set our alarm. We've got an alarm. I've got 3 man-eating dogs out in the yard that, you know, are patrolling my yard. German Shepherd dogs that, you know, they live outside. Of course, they live in the south, so it never really gets that cold. But they live on our property, and they're out there, you know, anything comes on our property, they're awake, you know, whether it's an animal or a person, and they're on it. Okay, so I know that's going on, and our doors and our windows are locked. You know, assuming everybody remembers to do all that. And there's kind of just a sequence of things we go through. So start thinking about your home, and as we list all the things that you do, they're probably on this list: doors, windows, locks, fence, alarm, motion detection. Maybe I got Crime Watch, which doesn't actually do anything, I don't think. Monitoring, meaning I've got you know, a third-party service that monitors my alarm and calls the police if something happens. And of course, I got the police station across the street. And I mentioned my dogs. We got firearms here in North Carolina, so everybody has firearms. All my kids have firearms. I got 7 kids, by the way, and 1 wife, and they're all armed too. And then of course we have insurance, so you know it's like a fortress here, right? I mean, can you imagine walking up my driveway with the 3 man-eating dogs and 9 rifles pointing out the window? It's not quite that bad, but anyway, so we've got this stuff in place, right? But what is the one big mistake that people are making out there? And it's not that they don't have 9 guns out the window. Okay, it's something else. Well, here's what it is. When we look at this list, this is what the people sold us. The alarm guy came by and said, hey, you got to have this alarm. The police, you know, said, hey, you got to do these things. And the Crime Watch was established to, you know, pick out anybody in the neighborhood that doesn't belong there. But the truth is, this isn't what protects you. What is? What is it? And here it is. There's actually a system that creates security. Now, we don't usually think about it like this. We think about the components and whether or not I have this or that. Do we lock the door? But the question you ought to be asking when you leave your home vacant or you go to sleep at night is the system intact? And what is that system? It's one of protection, detection, response. Protection, I'm going to stop people from coming in. I'm going to lock things up. I've got a detection in place, so if something does break through the perimeter, I'm going to see it, or it's going to alert the right people. And then there's a response plan that follows. It's a sequence, and it always happens from left to right, from protection, detection, response. It's timed, right? It has to have a timely response if it's going to work. If this sequence system doesn't work, if it's not timed correctly, if it doesn't go in the right order, it will fail every single time. Now, if we were live, and I wish, you know, I mean, you were in the same room as me and we could see each other, you know, person to person, and I could get a raise of hands, I'd like to do that. And what I'd be asking you is, which one of these columns do you think is the most important column? Now, it turns out that one of these columns is most important. Now, they're all important. You need all of them. You can't eliminate any one of them, but one of them is most important, meaning it needs to be nearly perfect. Okay, so I wonder if you could just write down on a piece of paper at your desk there, whatever it is, which one you think it is. So just take a second and jot down either a P, a D, or an R. All right. Now, if we were all in the same room and I took a raise of hands, and I've done this literally hundreds of times over the last couple of years, all right, I can tell you what my audiences would say. Well, first, let me tell you this. Not long ago, I spoke to a whole audience, 300 CISOs, Computer Information Security Officers, right? These are the guys that are security officers at the highest level for banks, International Bankers Association. Okay, that's who I'm speaking for. I was their keynote speaker. And I asked this question. I asked for a raise of hands. I got 300 people. And what column do you think they picked? Well, I'm going to tell you what they picked, okay? A third of them picked column 1. A third of them picked column 2. And a third of them picked column 3. Which is kind of scary. These are guys who are watching over your or my money, and they don't even agree with each other. But it was a split, an even split across all 3 columns. Now, I'm here to tell you that one of these columns is most important. All right, so which one did you write down? If I were talking to a group of business leaders, I can tell you that 90% of them, at least close to it, 90%, would pick column 1. Column 1, all right? And it makes sense, because column 1 is the one where you keep people out. You know, you think about how you're going to protect your home, we're going to keep people out. I don't want people to come in my home and then worry about protecting. But the truth is, if you look at your home and you think, okay, I got this stuff in place, how easy is it to break in through column 1? Assuming I don't care about detection, or I don't think I'll be detected or responded to. How hard is it if somebody wants to get in? It's easy. You know it's easy. Garage doors are simple to get through, but most violations or most break-ins actually happen with the front door. It is simple, right? You've seen it on TV. The police show up to the door, FBI, they kick the door, and it's easy, right? I mean, way easier than it would be with a business and a home, right? Really easy to break in. So what is it that protects, right? When you think about a bank, the doors are open all day long. And it's true that you can get into any building, really, either through social engineering or through breaking and entering or just walking in. But the ability to be detected, to be spotted, either by a security team or a thing you got to go through like TSA at the airport or in your home with cameras and alarms and so forth, the detection has to be perfect. If it's not, if it's too sensitive, it's always going off like car alarms do in the neighborhood. You know, you're just holding up your key fob, just like, is that my car? Just turn it off. Nobody even looks because they go off all the time. Or on the flip side of that, they don't go off enough. So perpetrator gets in, there isn't going to be a response because there's no detection. The detection has to be right. And you know what? If the burglar thinks that the detection is good, he's not going to come in because he knows he's going to get caught. Even if your response plan isn't that good, he'll think to himself, he doesn't know. He doesn't know how good the response plan is, but he knows he's going to get detected, so he's not going to try a lot of times. And that's true on the computer side too. Detection is the one that has to be nearly perfect, both in physical and in digital. So when I look at my neighborhood and I look at the homes here, were there alarms armed? Were there ways to detect that break in the middle of the day when people are away at work? No, there weren't. Okay, and so these people left their alarms unset. It was easy to break in. Most of the break-ins in our neighborhood happened in back windows. People climbed in the window, stole the jewelry and alarm, and took off. And there was no response plan. Okay, and that's the way security works. Now, if we look at networks for a moment, let's take a look at your computers, your servers, your networks, whatever it is. The majority of data is protected by firewalls, passwords, and encryption. Firewalls, passwords, encryption. Where does this stuff go? It's all in column one. There's very little ability to detect stuff that's coming in real time. Companies can't do that. I mean, they can do it, but they haven't put in place the stuff that does do it. They've spent, according to Gartner Group, 80 to 90% of the security budget is spent in column one, but it's the wrong column. And even large companies that have some of the detection technology, many of them don't have people who really even understand what they're looking at. So when alerts start to come together, they don't really know what it is. Now, that's not true in the very, very large companies, the big financial institutions and so forth. They have hired people that know how to do this now because they get this. But as soon as you come down into the middle market and into small business, this technology doesn't exist in just about every company I go into. There is no ability to detect an intrusion. The thought is we got passwords, we got firewalls, we're fine, nobody really wants our data, and they don't understand. And if you don't understand, people could be in your stuff right now and you won't know it because today's attacks are largely stealth, except for ransomware. Ransomware is one of those things where they come in and they notify you, we're stealing your stuff. But any other attack comes in a sneaky way and you don't even know what's in there. And they're just siphoning off your data and they're selling it somewhere. Or they've planted stuff in your environment and it's going to trigger and it will be ransomware. It's just not gone off yet. You don't know. You just don't know until it happens or until somebody makes a mistake 10, 12 months later and you figure it out. And it's a bad place to be. So if you go online and read the news or whatever it is, you're going to see statistics, tons of statistics about how many companies are getting hit with ransomware, with other types of attacks that steal data, with denial of service, with all kinds of attacks that are crippling businesses and putting them out of business or taking them out of business for several days in a row. It's creating major financial losses. This is a big, big deal. Now, this is what security ought to look like right here, and many times it doesn't, but you ought to jot down this little chart here: protection, detection, response, just like we talked about with the house, with a focus on detection across the people, the technology, and the physical. And by the way, physical and digital security are really coming together here because a lot of physical security is done digitally now. It's all computerized. So what this does is it creates this matrix of 9 different boxes, and I've put in a few placeholders here, but really the whole thing should be filled out at different levels depending on the kind of data you have and the area you are in business. You know, are you healthcare, are you financial, are you manufacturing, are you transportation? Depending on what you have is going to dictate what types of controls you need to have in each one of these boxes. And in starting to build this model in the middle, understanding you probably have a firewall in place, is really, really important to get some detection in there right away, and then to start to figure out, well, what's our response? How fast can we get back up and running? How fast can I recover from some sort of disaster? If I get hit with ransomware, how many days will I be down? How fast can I get back up and running? Do I have to pay the ransom? What if they don't actually release my data after the ransom? What do I do? You know, there's all these different contingencies that need to be thought out, and they need to be thought out before it's too late. Because when they're not, we end up with businesses going out of business. Now, that's the big mistake. It needs to be detection, response, with some protection. And by the way, response is the second most important. So your detection, your response, and then go back and make sure you've got the proper protection in place. All three are needed, sequential, left from right, with an emphasis on detection and real-time detection. And the faster you can respond to that real-time detection, the better off you're going to be. Now, the last part I want to cover, it won't take long, is to start helping you build a culture of security inside your organization. All right. So how do we stop the leakage? How do we get people in the company who are creating and using data to start thinking about security? Because that is not the big mistake, but the big hole. All right. The big mistake is we can't detect and respond. The big hole is we've got people who are sitting there handling very, very sensitive data. So sensitive they don't even understand what it's really worth because they're just in the job and that's what they do. They're used to that data. It's kind of like the bank teller just gets used to handling millions of dollars, and you know, maybe they do think about it. I don't know. I've never been a bank teller, but the point is, you know, at some point in the job, it's just paper. You know, you're just used to handling it. So we need to build a culture that gets them back focused on what is this information, how critical is it, what's it worth. Remember, data is money. Number one is that you need to teach your organization. Everybody needs to know this. Our data is worth money. It is a currency. Okay. And it's the computers are the cheap part. You know, if I lose my phone or my computer breaks or whatever it is, that's the cheap part. All that stuff is replaceable, but data is not necessarily replaceable. You lose your data and you may never get it back. Okay. It's the expensive part. And that is the money part. It's a currency. It doesn't have to be financial data to be currency. It just needs to be worth money. Okay. That's the key. Okay. And it can be erased or modified in seconds. It's easy to corrupt data. And when you take data and you just corrupt it, it turns into useless trash. Really, that's all it is. Now, if I understand that my data is money, I also need to understand that all the compliance regulations like PCI are not security. Okay, so I got all the boxes checked. That's good. I'm not going to be fined. I'm just going to stay in business, you know, and Visa's happy with me, or, you know, whatever the compliance thing is. That's great. But I still am not secure until I start looking at security. Now, here's something I just, you know, I want to bring this up. It's not really a political statement, but it's true. Okay, when people get hacked into, think about big organizations like Sony Pictures and, you know, whoever else got hacked into, Office of OPM. The government has to respond. The public wants them to respond. But what's the government going to do? Are we going to go attack North Korea because they broke into Sony Pictures and destroyed a bunch of stuff? No, they can't do that. They can't even prove that it was North Korea. Now, they think it was, but they can't prove it. And it's not calling them into war. So what are they going to do? They have to respond. And what they do is they respond with more compliance regulations. That's why compliance is really just a form of bureaucracy that initially feels good to the public. The government's taking action. They're putting more stuff in place. It's going to keep me secure. But as a business leader, as you know, if you're taking credit cards or if you're handling healthcare information, you know that it is costing you a fortune to be compliant. And it's not necessarily addressing the right things. In fact, the same thing is true when you go to the airport and you go through all that TSA mess. You know, somebody got into the airplanes one way, and so they built a whole security system around it, and that next person's just going to come in a different way. That's how it works. Okay, so compliance says you need to have this, or we're just going to go over here. That is the way it works. So the number one thing you can do for yourself and for all your colleagues out there is stop thinking about compliance as security and start putting security in place so we don't get more compliance, because we don't need more compliance. We need more security. Okay, number three, we need to start thinking, and this is a paradigm shift, a thought process change for the people that you work in your company. Now, you and I know that when the average person gets a message in their inbox that says, it's time to update your password, and they're sitting there going, man, I've already used cat 123, cat 321, cat 132, and they're going through all these ridiculous passwords that they're annoyed. Your family members feel that way. Your employees feel that way. It's just the way it is. But it's because we've built our security thinking about it like insurance. I don't want more insurance, I don't want to pay another annual insurance fee, right? I don't want that. Although if something bad happens, I want it to be there. I just don't want to pay for it, right? And when security is treated like insurance, it kind of builds this mindset. So what we need to do is we need to think about security as an enabler, and we need to find ways to make security simple. It needs to be simple. It needs to be usable, user-friendly. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get them thinking about the cool things that can happen if you're secure. Now, unfortunately, we've already gone to Starbucks and started to work there without safety. But if you want to access your bank from a public network, you probably should be doing it differently than the average person does it. The fact is, the technology is out there to detect and respond to an intrusion and keep you safe, computing almost anywhere. You can sit next to your competition at the airport. You can compute on a plane while it's in flight. You can access your bank from Starbucks. And you can do all kinds of really cool stuff, interacting with suppliers, interacting with employees, interacting with customers digitally. Bring your own device. You can do all kinds of really cool things that help your business if you have the right security in place. And I relate this to a rock climber. When you go talk to a rock climber and you talk to them about their equipment, they're not upset that they had to buy ropes or carabiners or harness or a helmet or special shoes. They kind of like that stuff. They like going to the store. I know, because I was a rock climber. And, when I was in college, I used to go rock climbing all the time. And it was exciting to go to the store and look at all the stuff and save my money up and buy another piece of equipment. And, all that equipment was enabling equipment. It was safety equipment. It wasn't equipment that allowed me to climb. It was equipment that saved me if I fell. And I'm here, I'm still alive, right? So it worked. It's not that I never fell, it's that I had the right equipment. And I look forward to it. That's the way we need to treat security. And whatever we can put in place, whether it's password vaults or other kinds of things that help us make security easier and get people thinking about it as an enabler, it makes it more interesting and it makes it easier to implement. We need to do that. Number 4, okay, so we're thinking about security and we know that all those trends are in force out there. And we're trying to get them to think of data as money and security as an enabler, okay? So we're thinking about all that stuff, but we also want them to understand that secrets need to be kept secret. Now, it is so true, and I don't know why this is, but it just is, that the higher you go up in an organization, the more rights people think they should have regarding data access. This is not true. People should have access to what they need access to at the level they need access to it. So some people should have the ability to write and read data but not delete it. Some people should have only the right to read it. Some people should not be able to read it or anything, and some people should be able to delete it too. All right? There's all levels of access control, and when we start putting information out there, it needs to be controlled. So one of the things I want to mention here again is data aggregation. Nobody needs to know that you're going on vacation next week. Nobody needs to know all the ages of your kids and their birth dates and all that kind of stuff on social media. It may be fun to exchange all that on Facebook, and you might think Facebook's privacy settings are great, but I'm here to tell you, if you put it online, it's accessible. So stop putting stuff online. It doesn't need to be online. Just do. Use the internet for business. Use it for some level of social. But, the stuff kids are putting out there today is crazy, crazy. As an example, back to social media for a moment. Years ago when I was younger and social media was just coming out, it was scary. Like, I had a blog, when I first started my blog, I'm like, wow, I'm going to write something and put it on, put my name on it. And I didn't really want a picture of anybody on there. It's just, and it was pretty sterile type information because I didn't want to expose myself. But now I turn around and I see like half the population of teenagers putting naked pictures of themselves online. And not just teenagers, but even people in their 30s and 40s are doing this now. And people who don't even look good are doing this. So like nothing is sacred anymore. Now, if somebody's willing to do that in today's world, what are they willing to do with your data? There's no way that they value themselves less than they value your data. So when people start putting stuff like this online to anybody out there, don't think your data is safe, because it's not. Okay, number 5, we need to understand people can get in. Remember, that protection column doesn't work. It's really just a tripwire. It's like the door opening so we can hear them come in. It's the window breaking so I know somebody's come in. But people can get in. There are holes in the firewall. A firewall is not really a firewall. It's got holes all throughout it to let all the stuff in that comes in, like email. And you and I know that most email is not legitimate email. It's spam. And it's full of stuff. And then people are going out to websites and surfing all kinds of websites, and those websites could have anything on them. Okay? All this stuff is dangerous. Okay? So understand, they can get in. So when you're thinking about your security, don't go, we got it covered. Think, wow, they can get in. So we need a way to detect anything that comes in that shouldn't be coming in, because they're going to get in. That's the mindset that I want everybody to have. And then when I start looking for them in, I should be thinking, they're in. Okay? In other words, I should expect them to be in. And if I don't find them, I always tell security people, keep looking. Look till you find them, because they're there. Okay? Unless you've got some incredible detection and response stuff already in place. But most companies don't. So therefore, they are probably in. And you know what? I'd say 90% of the time we do security assessments. We assess data, assess networks. We find evidence of malicious behavior, meaning that people could be collecting passwords, stealing data, and doing all kinds of things, including watching you through your camera on your laptop right now, even though the green light's not on. You don't need a green light when you're a hacker. You can turn that thing off. It's just a switch, a software switch. Turn that thing off and watch, or listen to the microphones. Listen to that person's phone calls as they're discussing their business. All that is easy and it's possible. Expect that they're in there, and expect that stuff is happening unless you're looking for them and you're stopping them. And then the last thing here is be ready to respond, because detection is no good if you can't respond, right? It's like the lifeguard on the beach when the person is out there drowning and he sees them, but he can't respond. You know, that happened to me when I was in my early 20s. I was the lifeguard on a beach at an ocean, and there were people out there swimming, but I had never lifeguarded at an ocean before, and I had a big group of campers with me, and all of a sudden this girl is out there, and she can't get back. She's in this riptide. She's out on Long Island. She's out in these big waves, and she's way out there. And I'm looking out there, and she's like headed out to sea, and I couldn't respond. It was like I was locked up because I forgot to bring any equipment with me. I was a pool lifeguard. I'm used to having the shepherd's crook and the little ring toss over here, and the person's never more than, say, 20 feet away from me. You know, you just toss the ring out there. If they don't get it, you jump in and grab them and pull them out. And here we are at the ocean. I almost lost this girl, except the guy up the beach who was a lifeguard for the ocean saw her, had his equipment, had his torpedo thing with him, dove in the water, grabbed her, and brought her back in. You know, that's what's happening out there. We are not detecting, but we have no way to respond because we don't expect to see anything happen. And that's what's going on out there. It's a crazy time. Okay, so I'm going to turn this back over to Truman. Truman, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share this with folks. And let me stop sharing my screen here, bring us back to this view. And but thank you, and I hope this is helpful to the folks that you're working with.
Yeah, Dave, you know, I hope that people on this webinar see how passionate you are about the cybersecurity, and TruTechnical Partners shares the exact same passion to educate people about the cybersecurity. You know, this is such important stuff to be able to talk about, and as you can see here on this webinar, Dave's just the evidence of some of the things that Dave talks about. These are some of the things that we're seeing currently in some of our customers here in the San Francisco Bay Area. You know, Dave, times are changing. Cybercrime, espionage, hacktivism are all growing threats. These are attacks that are so sophisticated and persistent, and that's why being able to do the protection, detection, and response is so important, because this is how you're able to help to limit or try to prevent as much of these cyber attacks as possible. So, you know, as a start, here at TruTechnical Partners, we'd like to help by offering an initial assessment. This is not just an ordinary internal or external scan, like most companies come in with an assessment today. We're looking for symptoms, behaviorals, IP attacks. These are all things Dave's been talking about. And while we can't do a full-blown out assessment, we would like to be able to come in and show you how some of the potential compromises can happen. You know, it's like what Dave and I had been talking about before. It's like an initial blood test screening. Using our unique assessment tools, we can usually pick up signs that tells us, you know, that there's been a possibly through the investigation, there could have been some type of a cyber attack. It could have been some type of a compromise, some kind of foul play. You know, if it's a compromise, you know, these are some of the things in the mergers and acquisitions industry that is so critical, that before anybody starts to spend money on trying to acquire a company, it's be very helpful to find out if the company had been compromised. So these are all kind of behavioral things that the assessment will be able to help us with. So the problem with cybercrime is that it's often hidden, it's undetected, and unaddressed, which exactly what Dave's been talking about for this webinar. It's like a cancer that spreads suddenly and without any recourse. So as a complementary assessment, and unfortunately, we only have time and resources to be able to do it here in the local Bay Area, because we can't, because I'm sure people are going to be seeing this all over the United States and probably internationally. So we really only have the ability to do it here in our local geographical area. So this assessment is really geared towards here in the local. So at the bottom of the screen is a button to sign up for your assessment. We encourage you to take us up on our offer. You would be amazed at some of the customers who have done it in the past have taken us up on that. And some of the things that we do find, it enlightens customers. So as a next step, let's focus on trying to eliminate as much of the security threats as possible.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Truman, and look forward to hearing how your stuff goes there, and certainly let me know how I can help you, and hopefully, again, this would be helpful to your audience here.
Thank you so much, Dave, and I appreciate your time, and I hope people have really learned quite a bit about their own cybersecurity threat possibilities. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Take care.